Now, I don't think it takes long for us to recognize how Jesus' kingship differs from worldly systems of hierarchical power today. And while our role in that kingdom becomes clear over time and a lifetime of following Jesus, we recognize there are still massive barriers to us stepping into the mission that Jesus is calling us towards today. Fear is one of the biggest barriers we face when it comes to actually following the kind of king Jesus is. Because let's face it, let's be honest, it's hard enough to follow Jesus if we lived in a world that was made unmistakably easier for us to follow Jesus. If it were widely accepted globally as a religion, which it mostly is, we would still have internal things to work out as a church, whether that be theology, practice, or tradition. But that isn't even our reality. We live in a world where Jesus' type of kingship is constantly undermined. The religious movement we are a part of, brought into through Jesus, is constantly called upon and questioned. Sometimes, for good reason, but still, at times, it can feel like our society counters the teaching and mission of Jesus, and particularly, as Christians, our place in that mission and teachings. My point is that fear can dominate how we seek to join God in the renewal of all things. It can perhaps even pull us back from wanting to join in that renewal in any way. But this isn't something that we just have happened upon in our late years of being the church. This is something that kind of happened right from the beginning of Jesus' mission, which began to take shape. They're essentially relying on the generosity of strangers to do what Jesus is asking them. And this really shows, again, how different Jesus' view of kingship was from the empire that ruled the region at the time. Do these things with nothing. No power, no status, just yourselves. Jesus goes on to say that the disciples will face opposition by local leadership and synagogues. And because of that, there is some good news, as the good news will have a platform to be shared with many. The disciples, Jesus also says, will also be experiencing moments of hatred towards them from the people closest to them. But Jesus explains to them not to quit, to take heart, to continue the mission. They should take joy in having their reputation smeared because of following Jesus. This warning's a bit heavy. It's not the most encouraging thing you're going to want to hear when you're being told to go out with nothing and share the good news. And I would assume it's very probably alarming and let's be really real, fearful for some of the men sitting around and listening to Jesus' charge. Even the phrase sheep among wolves feels like there will be an inevitable attack upon the disciples. And while I think we imagine individuals performing these wolf-like acts, Jesus' words are not directed at any one group, rather a system of violence and oppression that is prolific during the time that Jesus was alive, and one that he is responding to. Again, contextually, this mini sermon is kind of surrounded by stories of Jesus going out and actively working against the system in the form of healing the sick, feeding the hungry, and again, caring for the poor. So while Jesus is giving his disciples this charge, I want to be clear that the focus of these passages are not to sort out the sheep and the wolves. Jesus' message is not one of vilification of any people group, but rather it is one that presents the disciples a posture to when they are vilified themselves, when they will face the same things that Jesus faced as he tried to bring renewal to a world that was broken and that was hurting. I want us to zoom in on one particular phrase or word that comes out in the Greek. Phobeo, which is representative of fear, being frightened, or to be alarmed. In this case, to not be doing any of those things, is a very, very important word in this context. Well, the word phobeo in this current text means fear. There is also other occurrences in Scripture where this word means reverence, revere, or to be in awe. There's an example of this, one chapter. Last week, Paul closed his time with this slide, encouraging us to lean into this posture as we don't have all the answers to following Jesus in the midst of our ordinariness. And I want to come back to it to say this, that following Jesus does not remove fear, but rather it changes how we carry it. Phobeo is evidence of that in and of itself. While Jesus' charge and invitation to the disciples set them up to feel helpless against a world that seemed to despise them, a world that we can only imagine brought them much fear, this word phobeo is a reminder that our fear is being transformed, that their fear would be transformed. Not by age, like I mentioned earlier, not by exposure, but becoming more and more like Jesus. The disciples would face trials and challenges they never expected, which of course would produce fear. But Jesus tells them to trust, to know that God is close to them, that they are valued, that while sparrows are cared for, surely God the Father, who knows the hair upon their head, will care for them, the disciples. And to trust means to be Jesus' hands and feet. To overcome fear means to take the first step. To be in awe, phobeo, means to do what their rabbi did. And watch as they slowly participate in a world that is overcome by awe instead of fear. We are now Jesus' hands and feet. But I recognize that the next step is hard, and that for many of us, that next step is very different for many, many, many reasons. For some of you, being here this morning was maybe a good first one, right? And we're so happy that you joined us. Well, maybe for others, you were curious and wondering where God is commissioning and sending you out to as well. But as we all attempt to transform that fear as we take our next steps, can I give you some thoughts? First, live courageously. Be brave. The disciples of Jesus walked into a world with nothing but a message. Speak that message, even when it costs you something. Refuse to be silent because fear is holding you hostage. And rather, stand against the injustice and hatred you see in the world by being the first to reveal the love and care of Jesus. Second, live wisely. Our passage kicked off with the statement to be as shrewd as a snake, to avoid recklessness, but use discernment. In wisdom, as we face the trials and the next steps ahead, we will have moments where we face tension. That's always going to happen. But Jesus invites us to navigate that tension with integrity and honesty. Third, live dependently on the Spirit moving within our midst. Verse 20 today reminds us that the Spirit can speak for us in times of tribulations. So allow it to, right? And allow yourselves to take off that feeling of needing to be in control, because that is the symptom of an empire that doesn't actually want you to be in control, but wants to control you. Trust means that we give, or we allow God to give us the right words. And fourth, live securely. Our worth is not determined by the world. God's care is intimate and constant. And Jesus is calling us to the same thing, to know people the same way. But I believe it becomes harder for us when we question it of ourselves.